Ryan sat outside his small shelter on the edge of the colony. The land around him stretched wide and silent, covered in silver dust that glowed softly under the twin moons. During the day, he worked with the other settlers, helping build walls, carrying supplies, and checking the water system. But at night, when the colony lights dimmed and everyone returned inside, Ryan felt the weight of loneliness. He had a habit that no one else shared. Instead of staying in his cabin, he carried dry sticks and stones outside and made a fire. He had learned this from old Earth stories that his grandmother once told him. Fire was simple, yet it carried history. It reminded him of home, even though Earth was now only a memory he had never seen. The flames flickered and danced, their light pushing back the shadows. Ryan sat close, hugging his knees, listening to the crackle. Sometimes he spoke quietly to the fire, as if it were a friend. "Another day gone," he whispered. "And still the stars keep their secrets." The stars above were bright and endless. Every night, he stared at them, wondering if other eyes were watching from far away. He imagined unseen travelers crossing the dark space, moving between worlds, maybe looking back at him. This night, something unusual happened. Ryan noticed a streak of light sliding across the sky. At first, he thought it was just a falling star. He had seen them before, quick flashes that burned and faded. But this one slowed down. It did not vanish. It curved gently, as if it were choosing where to go. Ryan leaned forward, his heart beating faster. "That's not a star," he said to himself. The light moved lower, then disappeared beyond the hills. The colony was quiet behind him, no one else had seen it. He sat by the fire, waiting, his eyes fixed on the shadows. The night grew colder, but he stayed outside. After some time, he felt a presence. It was not sound, not movement, just a sense that something was near. His fire crackled, sending sparks into the dark. Then, beyond the circle of light, a shape appeared. It was tall and slim, more shadow than body. Ryan could not see its face. It stood still, just watching him from the edge of the fire's glow. He swallowed hard. He thought of calling out, but his voice caught. Instead, he stayed quiet. The figure did not step closer, but it did not leave either. Its head tilted slightly, like it was curious. Ryan held out his hand toward the fire, showing he meant no harm. "This is fire," he said softly. "It keeps me warm." The figure did not answer. Of course, he thought, it wouldn't understand. But then, to his surprise, it raised its own hand slowly, copying his gesture. The movement was gentle, not threatening. Ryan's fear eased, replaced by wonder. He did not know what kind of being it was, but it was alive, and it was curious. That was enough. For a long time, they stayed that way, Ryan by the fire, the figure at the edge of the light. The silence felt heavy but not unfriendly. The fire burned lower, the flames shrinking into red embers. Finally, the figure turned and faded back into the shadows. Ryan almost called out, but he stopped himself. Something told him that this was not the end. The visitor would return. He looked at the glowing embers and smiled faintly. His heart was still racing, but it was not from fear. For the first time since coming to this lonely place, he did not feel entirely alone. He whispered to the fire, "I think the stars have answered." That night, long after the fire died, Ryan lay awake inside his shelter. He replayed the moment again and again, the figure watching, the mirror gesture, the quiet connection. The colony slept peacefully, unaware of what had happened. But Ryan knew. Something had changed. The fire had not just been his comfort anymore. It had been a bridge. And tomorrow night, he would light it again. The next day passed like any other. Ryan worked with the others, carrying heavy boxes of tools and helping fix a broken water pipe near the colony's edge. People spoke about soil samples, farming plans, and supply schedules, but Ryan's mind was far away. He kept thinking about the shadow he had seen last night. When the sun dipped behind the hills, he hurried through his work. His hands trembled slightly as he gathered sticks. He told himself it might not come again. Maybe it was only his imagination. But a part of him hoped with all his heart that the figure would return. As night spread across the land, Ryan built his fire again. The flames grew tall, filling the circle of stones with golden light. He sat cross-legged, staring into the fire, listening to the crackle. The stars above shone brighter than ever, and the air was sharp with cold. At first, there was nothing. Only silence and shadows. Ryan's hope began to fade. But then, just as the flames steadied, he noticed movement beyond the light. The figure was back. It stood exactly where it had before, half hidden in the dark. The firelight reached only far enough to outline its slim form. Ryan's heart leapt, but this time he did not freeze. He leaned forward, careful not to move too fast. "You came back," he whispered. The figure tilted its head, just like the night before. Its body shimmered faintly, as if reflecting the fire's glow. Slowly, Ryan reached for a stick and placed it in the flames. Sparks flew upward. "This is fire," he said again, his voice calm and steady. "It gives warmth." The figure stepped closer, just one small step. The light touched more of its shape now. It was taller than Ryan, thin and graceful. Its skin seemed smooth and pale, almost like polished stone. Its eyes glowed faintly, not from the fire, but from within. Ryan's breath caught, but he stayed still. He picked up another stick, then set it gently in front of him, away from the fire. He pointed at it, then at the flame. The figure hesitated, then bent down. Its long fingers touched the stick. It lifted it slowly, as if testing its weight. Then it copied Ryan, leaning forward toward the fire. When the flame caught the stick, the figure jumped slightly back. The stick glowed, tiny fire at its tip. Ryan smiled. "Yes, see. Fire." The figure stared at the small flame, holding the stick carefully. Then, to Ryan's surprise, it bent down and placed the burning stick gently back into the circle of stones. The fire grew stronger for a moment. The visitor looked at its hand, then at Ryan. Slowly, it raised its arm, mirroring the gesture from last night. Ryan lifted his hand too, smiling wider. It was like a silent greeting, a simple way of saying we understand each other. The night grew colder, but Ryan hardly noticed. For a long time, they sat near the fire, not speaking, not moving too much, only sharing the glow. Ryan would occasionally add more wood, and the visitor would watch every motion, as if memorizing each step. At one point, Ryan picked up a small piece of bread he had brought. He held it out, unsure what to do. The visitor tilted its head again, but did not reach for it. Instead, it bent down and touched the ground. With long fingers, it pressed against the soil, and when it lifted its hand, there was something in its palm. It was a stone, but not like any Ryan had seen. The stone gave off a soft blue glow, humming faintly, like a quiet song. The visitor placed it carefully on the ground between them, pushing it forward. Ryan gasped softly. He picked it up. The stone felt warm, not heavy, and the glow pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. "Thank you," he said, though he was not sure the visitor understood his words. He placed the glowing stone next to the fire, and the light blended beautifully with the golden flames. The visitor made a soft sound, something between a hum and a sigh. Then it sat down, yes, actually sat just beyond the fire's edge. It did not come too close, but it no longer stayed standing in the shadows. Ryan felt a rush of joy. He had not expected this. Only 2 nights ago, he thought he was alone under the stars. Now, here he was, sitting by a fire with someone from beyond his world. The fire burned lower as the night passed. Neither moved much. Sometimes Ryan spoke softly, telling simple things, his name, the word fire, the word warm. The visitor listened, its glowing eyes fixed on him, but gave no words in return. At last, when the flames turned into glowing embers, the visitor stood. It placed one long hand on its chest, as though giving a sign, then turned and stepped back into the darkness. Within moments, it was gone. Ryan sat quietly, holding the glowing stone in his hand. His heart was full. He whispered, "I'm not alone anymore." That night, he carried the stone back to his shelter. It glowed faintly beside his bed, filling the room with a gentle light. For the first time in many months, Ryan slept with a smile on his face, dreaming not of silence but of friendship. The next morning, Ryan woke with the soft blue glow of the strange stone beside him. Its light filled the corners of his small shelter, gentle and steady, as if it carried its own breath. He kept staring at it, turning it over in his hands. It was smooth, warm, and alive in some way he could not explain. When he walked through the colony later, the stone was hidden inside his jacket. He did not tell anyone about it. He thought of the visitor and the fire, and he knew the secret was not ready to be shared. Some settlers worried too much about rules and dangers. They might be afraid. Ryan wanted to protect this new connection, at least for now. All day, his mind was restless. He hurried through his tasks, checking solar panels, sorting boxes, moving tools so he could return to his fire when night came. As the moons rose, he built the fire again. The flames rose, chasing away the shadows. He set the glowing stone beside it, the golden and blue lights mixing together. Not long after, he felt it again, the quiet presence at the edge of the circle. He looked up. The visitor had returned. This time, Ryan's heart did not race with fear. He smiled. "Welcome back." The visitor stepped closer, more than before. Its tall frame was clearer in the firelight. The smooth skin reflected both fire and stone light, creating patterns across its body. Its glowing eyes fixed on Ryan, then on the fire, then on the stone. Ryan picked up a stick and fed the flame. The visitor copied him, lifting another stick and placing it carefully in the fire. Sparks jumped, and the visitor leaned back slightly, still cautious but less startled than before. They sat together again in silence, but the silence no longer felt heavy. Ryan thought it was time to try something new. He pulled a small pack from his side and opened it. Inside were simple things: dried fruit, flat bread, and a small bottle of water. He took a piece of bread, broke it in two, and held half toward the visitor. The visitor tilted its head but did not take it. Instead, it reached into a pouch at its side. From it, the being pulled out another glowing stone, smaller than the first, but humming with a soft sound. It set the stone gently on the ground between them. Ryan laughed quietly. "A trade, then. My food for your stone." The visitor did not answer, but it made a soft hum, as though pleased. Ryan placed the bread down beside the new stone, then picked up the glowing gift. The visitor leaned forward and, very slowly, lifted the bread. It held it carefully, as though unsure what to do. After a moment, it brought the bread close to its face, studied it, and placed it gently on the ground again. It seemed the visitor was not ready to eat human food. "That's all right," Ryan said softly. "Maybe another time." The fire crackled between them. Ryan felt warmth spreading in more than just the air. There was a trust forming, one step at a time. After a while, Ryan picked up a stick and began drawing shapes in the dirt near the fire. He drew a circle and pointed up at the moons. "Moon," he said clearly. The visitor leaned closer, watching carefully. Then, with a long finger, it drew its own shape in the dirt. It was not a circle but a tall tower with curved lines around it. The visitor pointed at the drawing, then at the glowing stone, then at the stars. Ryan blinked, trying to understand. Was it showing him its home? Its world? Your place, he guessed. Your world. The visitor tapped the drawing again, then looked up at the stars with its glowing eyes. Ryan felt his chest tighten with excitement. They were sharing more than objects now, they were sharing stories. For the rest of the night, they drew more pictures. Ryan showed simple things, a house, a tree, a river. The visitor made shapes Ryan did not know, curved lines, spirals, and strange patterns, but they were beautiful. Sometimes, when the visitor finished a drawing, the small glowing stones in its pouch would hum softly, as if reacting to the shapes. Ryan noticed this and pointed. Your stones, they sing. The visitor tilted its head, then placed one of the stones on the drawing it had made. The stone pulsed with light, glowing brighter along the lines. It was like the stone understood the picture. Ryan stared in wonder. It's alive, he whispered. The visitor made the soft hum again, as if agreeing. Hours passed, and the fire grew low. The visitor stood at last, its tall frame casting a long shadow across the ground. Before leaving, it reached down, pressed its hand gently against the earth, and left behind one more glowing stone. Then it turned, fading into the dark once again. Ryan sat by the fire alone, but he did not feel lonely anymore. He looked at the stones glowing softly in the dust. They seemed like promises, like steps towards something larger than he could yet understand. He whispered to himself, we are learning from each other. As the embers cooled, Ryan knew the nights ahead would bring more than silence. Each flame, each drawing, each stone carried a message. Two worlds were beginning to meet, not with fear, but with warmth. The nights passed quickly, and the fire became more than just warmth for Ryan. It became a meeting place, a quiet circle where two lives touched without words. Every evening, he prepared carefully. He gathered sticks, brushed the ground clean, and placed the glowing stones from the visitor near the fire. When the flames rose, the stones pulsed gently, mixing their soft blue light with the golden glow. The visitor always came. At first, it stayed at the edge of the circle. Then, night by night, it moved closer, until it finally sat across from Ryan with its long arms folded and its glowing eyes fixed on the fire. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt full, as if the fire itself carried their voices. Ryan decided it was time to share something more. He picked up a stick and drew again in the dirt. This time, he drew not just shapes but little figures. He drew a person sitting by a fire, with stars above. Then he pointed at himself and at the fire before them. Me, he said softly. Ryan. The visitor leaned in, its glowing eyes following every line. Slowly, it took a stone and pressed it into the dirt, leaving a mark. Then it drew its own shape, tall and slim, with circles around its head like light. The visitor tapped the figure, then touched its chest. Ah, Ryan whispered. You. The visitor made a soft hum, as though pleased. For a while, they took turns drawing and pointing. Ryan showed the colony tiny squares for houses, tall poles for solar panels, little dots for people. He pointed toward the colony behind him, then back at the drawing. The visitor's drawing was stranger. It made swirling lines that crossed and bent like rivers, but with towers rising out of them. Then it placed one of its glowing stones on top of the drawing. The stone pulsed and spread its light along the lines, making the picture glow. Ryan stared, amazed. Your home, he said quietly. Your world. The visitor looked up at the stars and then back at him. From that night onward, their meetings were filled with these silent exchanges. Ryan told stories, even though he was unsure if the visitor understood the words. He spoke of Earth, the planet he had never seen but had learned about from books and his grandmother's voice. He told of oceans that stretched farther than the eye could see, of forests thick with green leaves, of birds that filled the sky with wings. As he spoke, he drew pictures in the dirt to show them. The visitor always watched with steady attention, its glowing eyes never blinking. Sometimes, it would answer by drawing its own stories. One night, it made a shape like a great circle, with many smaller circles around it. It pointed at the big circle, then at itself, then touched its glowing stones. Ryan guessed slowly. Your people, many. The visitor pressed its long fingers into the dirt again, repeating the smaller circles, until the ground was covered with them. Yes, Ryan said softly. Many of you. When the visitor finished its pictures, it would hum, a sound low and calm. The hum seemed to blend with the crackling of the fire, like music. Ryan sometimes hummed back, his tone clumsy but sincere. Together, the fire and the stones carried their shared voices into the night. One evening, as the flames burned high, Ryan lifted his eyes to the stars. He pointed to them, then spread his arms wide. So many, he said. So far. The visitor looked too, its glowing eyes reflecting the starry sky. Then it picked up a stone and tossed it gently into the air. The stone floated for a moment, glowing brighter, then settled back into its hand. The visitor pointed at the stone, then at the stars, and then at the fire. Ryan's breath caught. Did it mean that the stars, the fire, and the stones were connected? That they were all part of something greater? He whispered, we are not so different. The visitor made its hum again, deeper this time, as if it understood. The fire crackled, and the warmth wrapped around them. The shadows danced, making their drawings on the ground flicker like moving pictures. For the first time, Ryan felt like he was not only learning about the visitor, he was learning about himself. Hours slipped away, but Ryan did not notice. The visitor finally stood, its tall frame glowing softly from the stone light. Before it left, it drew one last picture, a circle of many figures, both human-like and tall like itself, all sitting around one fire. It tapped the drawing, then looked at Ryan. Ryan's heart swelled. He nodded slowly. Together. The visitor gave a long hum, almost like a song, before stepping back into the night. When Ryan returned to his shelter, he carried that picture in his heart. He lay awake for a long time, thinking of the fire, the stories, and the shared dreams. He understood now this was not just about warmth or gifts. It was about connection. The fire was no longer his alone. It belonged to them both. The fire had become a promise. Every night, Ryan built it carefully, placing the stones in a circle, feeding the flame slowly, waiting for the tall visitor to arrive. It never failed. The being always came, quiet and watchful, carrying its glowing stones and its curious eyes. But one evening, as the moons rose higher, Ryan felt something different in the air. It was not just one presence at the edge of the circle. There were more. When he looked up from the fire, his heart gave a quick jump. Beyond the shadows, he saw not one figure but three. The first was his familiar visitor, standing steady. The other two stood further back, tall and slim like the first, but their glowing eyes flickered nervously. Ryan's breath caught. He realized this was the moment he had both hoped for and feared. The first visitor stepped forward, closer to the fire as usual. It placed one hand on its chest, then turned slightly toward the others, as if telling them it was safe. But the newcomers did not move. Their bodies leaned away from the flames, uncertain. Ryan felt the silence pressing on him. He could sense their caution. Perhaps they had never seen fire before, just like the first one. Perhaps they thought it was dangerous. He thought quickly. If he showed fear, they might leave. If he showed pride, they might not trust. So he chose warmth. Slowly, he added more wood to the flames. The fire grew brighter, spreading golden light across the ground. The visitors stepped back a little at the sudden glow, but the first one raised its hand, calming them. Ryan lifted his own hands and spoke softly, even though he knew they would not understand the words. "It's all right. Fire is a friend." The two new visitors tilted their heads. Their glowing eyes flickered between the fire, Ryan, and their companion. After a long pause, one of them stepped a little closer, just enough for the light to touch its skin. Ryan felt relief. He picked up one of the glowing stones that had been gifted to him before and placed it near the fire. The stone pulsed gently, humming with soft sound. The light from the fire and the stone blended together, warm and calm. The first visitor made its low hum, a sound Ryan now recognized as comfort. Then, to his surprise, it bent down, drew a small circle in the dirt, and tapped it. The other two watched. Slowly, one of them copied the circle with a long finger. Ryan smiled wide. He picked up a stick and drew another picture beside the fire, a simple shape of many figures sitting together. He pointed at the fire, then at the figures in the dirt. "Together," he said clearly. The newcomers stared. Then one of them made a short sound, not quite a hum, but softer, almost like a question. The first visitor replied with a longer hum. And then, carefully, both newcomers moved closer and sat just beyond the edge of the circle. Ryan's chest filled with joy. The fire, once his lonely comfort, now held four around it, one human, three from another world. The night grew deep, and Ryan tried to share what he could. He spoke simply, pointing at himself, saying his name again, "Ryan." The first visitor touched its chest, repeating the same gesture. The newcomers copied, though they gave no names, only the sign of identity. To show trust, Ryan opened his small pack of food again. He placed a piece of dried fruit on the ground between them. The newcomers did not take it, but they watched with interest. Instead, one of them reached into its pouch and pulled out a small cluster of stones. These were different, rounder, with tiny lights dancing inside. The visitor placed them on the dirt in front of the fire. The stones began to glow brighter as the flames flickered, as if responding to the heat. Tiny sparks of color moved inside them like stars. Ryan gasped softly. "Beautiful," he whispered. He picked one up, holding it carefully. It felt warm and alive, like a small heartbeat. He set it back gently. The visitors hummed together, their tones blending into a strange, calming sound. The fire crackled in answer, and Ryan felt as if the whole night was listening. For hours, they remained in that circle of light, drawing in the dirt, trading gifts of stones and pictures, watching the fire dance. Ryan noticed how the newcomers glanced often at their companion, waiting for signs of safety. Trust was not easy, but it was building, flame by flame. At last, when the fire turned low, the newcomers stood. They placed their hands on their chests, just as the first visitor always did, then turned back toward the dark hills. The first visitor lingered a little longer, humming softly, before following them. Ryan sat alone again, but this time, his heart was full. He looked at the cluster of glowing stones they had left behind. Their light shimmered gently, like stars in the dust. He whispered to himself, "The circle is growing." And he knew it was true. What had started as one shadow at the edge of the fire was now becoming something greater. The fire was no longer just his or even theirs, it was a bridge, pulling two worlds closer, night by night. The nights grew colder as the season slowly shifted, but Ryan never minded. Each evening, he returned to the circle of stones with dry sticks in his arms and the glowing gifts of his visitors in his pack. The fire was no longer only for himself. It had become a place where two worlds met, where silence turned into friendship. Now, it was not just one visitor who came. Three often arrived, sometimes four. They sat in quiet lines beyond the fire at first, but with each night, they moved closer until their tall frames leaned comfortably in the glow. Ryan had learned something important: they were not afraid anymore. One night, As the fire crackled and sparks rose into the night sky, Ryan decided it was time to show them more about fire. He picked up a flat stone and laid it carefully near the flames. Then he placed a thin slice of bread on top. The visitors tilted their heads, watching closely as the bread browned slowly in the heat. The smell spread softly in the air. "This is cooking," Ryan said with a smile. "Food." The first visitor hummed, leaning closer. When the bread was ready, Ryan lifted it and placed it on a clean cloth. He tore it in two and held one piece toward them. The visitors studied it, curious but unsure. After a long pause, one reached out, its long fingers taking the piece carefully. It raised it to its face, tapped it gently, then lowered it. Instead of eating, it placed the bread on the ground between them and reached into its pouch. From it came a glowing stone, larger than the others. This stone pulsed in many colors: blue, green, and silver, like water and sky combined. Ryan gasped softly. He held the stone in his hands, feeling a warmth that spread through his fingers like sunlight. The hum inside the stone was deeper than any he had felt before. The visitor pointed at the fire, then at the stone, then back at Ryan. "You want me to understand this?" Ryan guessed. The visitor hummed once, clear and low. Ryan placed the stone carefully near the flames. To his amazement, the fire's light and the stone's colors blended together. The flames flickered brighter, and the stone's glow grew stronger. It was as if the two were speaking to each other. The visitors all leaned forward, their glowing eyes reflecting the mix of lights. Ryan whispered, "Your stones, and our fire. They work together." That night, they showed him more. One of the visitors lifted a stone and placed it in the dirt. With long fingers, it drew a spiral around it. As the spiral closed, the stone began to spin slowly, floating just above the ground. Ryan stared, amazed. The stone was moving on its own. The visitor pointed at the fire, then at Ryan, then at the spinning stone. "You give us fire," Ryan said softly, trying to understand. "And you give us this." The visitor hummed again, the sound almost like agreement. So Ryan showed them more of fire's secrets. He picked up two sticks and rubbed them together, making smoke and then a small spark. The visitors leaned close, fascinated by the simple act. When the spark turned into flame, one of them copied the motion with surprising care, though it did not succeed. Ryan laughed gently, showing again, patient like a teacher. The visitors, in return, taught him how to calm their glowing stones. When they hummed low, the light dimmed. When they hummed higher, the glow brightened. Ryan tried, his voice clumsy, but to his delight, the stone in his hands flickered faintly in answer. They all hummed together then, filling the night with strange music that blended with the fire's crackle. The sound was unlike anything Ryan had ever heard: calm, deep, and full of harmony. The circle had become more than warmth. It had become a classroom, a place of exchange. Fire for stone, story for hum, picture for picture. When the night grew late, Ryan leaned back and looked at them. Their glowing eyes reflected the flames, their tall forms calm and at ease. He realized something: they trusted him. Not just the first visitor, but all of them. And he trusted them. Before leaving, the first visitor drew one last shape in the dirt, a great circle of many figures, both human and tall, holding stones and fire between them. It tapped the drawing, then looked at Ryan with steady eyes. Ryan nodded slowly, his heart full. "Yes. Together." The visitors gave their low hum, then stood and disappeared into the night. Ryan sat alone once more, but not truly alone. Around him lay glowing stones, each one humming softly, each one carrying a piece of their trust. He looked at the fire and whispered, "We are building something new." That night, he slept with the stones near his bed. Their gentle glow filled the room, and in his dreams, he saw a future where fire and stone burned side by side, warming not just one world but two. The days passed quickly, and Ryan noticed how much had changed since the first night by the fire. What began as quiet curiosity had grown into something larger, something he could hardly describe. The visitors no longer came as strangers. They came as companions, carrying glowing stones, soft hums, and new lessons each night. The fire had become the bridge between them. One evening, as the air turned cool and the stars shone brightly, Ryan carried extra wood to the circle of stones. He felt something different in the night, like a promise waiting in the air. He built the fire higher than usual, sparks leaping upward like tiny stars. Soon, the tall figures appeared. Not three, not four, but many. More than Ryan had ever seen before. They moved quietly but with purpose, surrounding the fire in a wide circle. Their glowing eyes reflected the flames, and each carried a stone that pulsed with soft colors. Ryan's heart beat fast. He had not expected so many. But he did not feel fear. He only felt wonder. The first visitor, the one who had given him the largest glowing stone, stepped forward. It placed its hand on its chest, then pointed at the fire, and then at Ryan. Slowly, it turned and made the same gesture to its people. Ryan understood. Tonight was not just another meeting. Tonight was a gathering. The visitors arranged their stones in a ring around the fire. As each stone touched the earth, it began to glow brighter, and together they formed a circle of light. The fire's orange and yellow flames blended with the stone's blue, green, and silver hues. The whole place shone like dawn had arrived early. The visitors began to hum in unison. The sound was deep, low, and steady, like the earth itself was singing. The hum rose and fell, growing richer with every voice added. Ryan listened, his eyes wide. The sound moved through him, calming his thoughts, lifting his heart. It was more than music, it was a message. Though he did not know the words, he felt the meaning. It spoke of welcome, of sharing, of unity. Ryan picked up a stick from the fire, the flame dancing at its tip. He raised it slowly so they could see. Then, with care, he drew a circle in the air with the burning light. The visitors hummed louder, their eyes glowing brighter. Ryan placed the stick back into the fire and whispered, "Together." The first visitor stepped forward again. It pointed at the ring of glowing stones, then at the fire, then finally at Ryan. It knelt down and drew a shape in the dirt, a figure with fire in its hands, standing beside a tall figure holding a glowing stone. Above them, it drew a star. Ryan studied the drawing. "You want to share this, not just here, but everywhere," he said softly. The visitor gave a clear hum. For a long time, they sat together, firelight and stone glow mixing until the entire clearing looked like the inside of a dream. Ryan spoke of his people, of how fire had given them warmth, safety, and a way to cook food. He spoke of long winters where fire was the only comfort, and of the joy that came from sitting around it with friends. The visitors listened, their eyes never leaving him. Then, in their own way, they told their story through hums and gestures. Ryan understood only pieces, but he saw images in his mind: cold dark places, endless journeys, and the moment when glowing stones first lit their paths. Two worlds, two kinds of light. When the fire grew low, Ryan added more wood. The flames rose again, strong and steady. The visitors placed their stones near it, and together, the two lights shone brighter than either could alone. Ryan felt something shift inside him. This was no longer about him teaching them or them teaching him. This was about building a future where fire and stone, human and visitor, stood side by side. Before leaving, the first visitor reached into its pouch and pulled out one final gift. It was a stone, small but bright, glowing softly in silver and gold. It placed the stone in Ryan's hands and pointed to the fire. Ryan held the stone close. "I'll keep it safe," he promised. The visitors hummed one last time, a sound so warm it felt like a smile. Then, slowly, they stepped back into the darkness, their glowing eyes fading among the trees. Ryan sat alone with the fire. Yet for the first time, he did not feel alone. The circle of stones still glowed, and the gift in his hands pulsed gently, as if alive. He looked into the flames and thought of what would come next. He imagined a time when his people would meet theirs, when fire and glowing stones would stand together, lighting paths on both worlds. He imagined children of both kinds sitting around the same flame, sharing stories as sparks danced upward into the night sky. The thought filled him with hope. As the fire burned steady and the stars shone above, Ryan whispered, "This is only the beginning." And in the glow of flame and stone, the night answered with silence, gentle and full of promise.